TXWaterpolo Podcast. Once again, I'm James Smith in Austin, Texas, and Joe Linehan is in North Texas.
I am.
You woke me up too early for this, man. We usually do these things like midday on Tuesdays, but we had to delay, so you woke me up.
It's all good. It's all good. Just drink your coffee. You'll be fine.
I'm having the best coffee days these days. It's really good. I'm sure people are really into that. We're going to hop right into it because first of all, I got to leave to go to a meeting. That's one thing. But also because the list of stuff we have, that's a lot of like short stuff, which is kind of cool. So first of all, last week was apparently one of the shortest UIL meetings of all time. And of course, Joe is such a lifer that he attended, I think, much of it. And what came out of that meeting that you
attended means that I watched it on the UIL homepage.
Precisely.
So the UIL Legislative Council meets twice a year. It's in June and October of each year. Last October was whenever they sanctioned the sport of water polo as the next UIL sport starting in fall 2021. And so this year, because of the pandemic, they did a kind of a virtual meeting. So, and it was very simple. The committee meetings were short, sweet, and kind of to the point. They didn't really like 95% of stuff, if they didn't really say yes to, but they also didn't say no to. They just kind of pushed it kind of forward to the next meeting because they want everybody to have a reasonable chance of getting their legislation pushed. The good and bad part is that water polo was only mentioned once.
In what context?
Well, there was a number of sports that were asking to be the next sport added, and they were like, well, water polo was the last sport added last October. Just don't. I mean, we're not going to take any action right now, but just come back in October. That was the only reason that water polo was kind of mentioned. So that's a good thing. We don't want anything kind of drastic to happen in fall of 2021. Not that I think anything can happen in fall of drastic happen, but the biggest thing that I got out of it is the UIL is working very, very hard to allow sports or allow school districts to make their own decision right now as far as the summer workouts go, and they are working very, very hard to get fall athletics kind of moving forward. They really would like to see fall athletics moving forward.
Football. Say it. It's football.
Yes, they do want to see football happen. Yes. Friday Night Lights. So,
do you get this sense that they're because of the success of water polo, and I think it surprised a lot of people, do you get the sense that these other sports, these other activities feel like, hey, why don't we have the opportunity to do that?
I don't know. I don't necessarily get the sense, but I would see that would be a kind of a natural next step. But, water polo did their due diligence for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And the UIL is going to make any other sport do their due diligence. And the water polo did everything that the UIL asked us to do every single year, and we didn't miss a meeting for every single year. So
for 7 or 10 years or something like that, right?
Yes. And and it's one of those that that's what other sports are going to have to do, is they're going to have to learn the rules and then play the game. So
I get the sense, I don't have a whole lot of evidence to support this, I'll be honest, but that's other sports kind of resent that water polo is the next one that they feel that their activity should be in there. And then
of course,
but
water polo would feel the same way if lacrosse got added.
Well, let me elaborate. So I think that they don't really know the degree of work that went into getting water polo added. I think they just feel like it was a whim of some kind. It's like they finally, I don't know, they finally convinced a quorum to add the sport. But I know that there's a lot of people who are into lacrosse and they think that they should be the next sport, especially because are there more? I thought they claimed that there are more players in the state of Texas than there are water polo players. To me, that's irrelevant. But yeah, they and other sports, they gotta show up.
But they also have to show up. They also have to kind of make sure that their rules are aligned with the UIL guidelines for like the basic guidelines of sports in general. Especially the eligibility aspect. You can't have athletes from another school playing for South Lake Carroll. You can have Keller kids playing for South Lake Carroll,
Right.
So that's what happens in some other sports currently right now that are not UIL.
Right.
And that stopped a long time ago for water polo. I don't even know if that was ever allowed.
Well, including
And
ours. I mean, in the West region and up there, we have consolidated teams. Now, of course, they don't qualify for states and all of that, but they
exactly,
can still
exactly,
play. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and they can play, but that's a temporary
Yes.
um, kind of piece in place to allow teams to grow.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not supposed to be a long-term tool.
Yeah.
So that's supposed to be a year or two until you have enough for your own school.
I'm so happy. I mean, I'm super happy that we had some consolidated teams coming and going in the West region, Austin to basically wake out to the Valley. But it's going to be so much better when these are all varsity and JV teams, all affiliated with a single high school. Just from my own management perspective, it's just going to be so much better.
And there's work going on right now that we're trying to create some additional events and tournaments for, the SPC, the TAPS, the private school, and the parochial school, and the homeschool groups, because, those schools are not going to be able to play past a certain point with the UIL teams. So we are making inroads there, so our goal is to have a parochial private school and homeschool state championship in fall of 2021.
No kidding, that early.
Yeah, and then eventually, we grow those number of schools as well to where you have, and to where each of those other organizations kind of split off and have their own state championships. So let's say in 5 years, the whole goal is, yes, we have the UIL state championship, but we also have a TAP state championship, SPC state championship, and a homeschool state championship.
That'd be really cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
So that's where we're kind of working for, right now. But just getting everybody on the same page, and we still have to grow the sport and get a bunch of schools to be able to play and such, and just make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. Good segue too, because the team that will probably lead that charge is St. Mark's. I mean, they need a place to go play. I was up in Dallas this weekend watching practice. Pegasus is one of the 6 clubs that is back in the pool, or back in the water. We can put it that way.
8 clubs.
Is it 8? Okay. So I watched their practice, and actually it was great. I mean, they follow their own rules. The pool is fairly strict about the way that they have to wear masks and keep distancing and so on. Fair enough, but they got some serious work done, just even in the short period that I watched. Any particular session was, I think, an hour, and then then they bring in the next group, and I think the limit was 15, 16 players, something like that. So it is encouraging. It's not really, I don't know, it's not really water polo in a lot of ways. It's a fundamental work, which is great. But I'm sure that people are waiting to actually have physical contact again.
Well, these kids have been off for like 3 months. Yeah. So I know there's been some kids that have been swimming consistently out there, and that and I'm sure they bring a ball to the YMCA and swim or whatever. So, everybody's on a different level, but fundamentals.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. There are no competitions tomorrow. So, it's so this is the time to work on that conditioning. This is the time to work on that, on the fundamentals. And I've been hearing that Pegasus is doing a tremendous job. I haven't been out on the pool deck yet, but it's great that you went out. Did you learn a couple things and going to bring back to the Aquatex practices?
Joe, I stole so much stuff. It was fantastic. It was so great. Okay. We actually did it last night. It was I was like, oh, we should be doing that. We should be doing that. So yeah, I didn't even tell Spencer. I just took everything that he was doing.
It's all right.
It's okay. Speaking of Pegasus and Trident and St. Mark's and that whole, that's such a complicated thing. And maybe it's not that complicated, but they're all related in a certain way. Is Mihai Oprea? He's leaving. We interviewed him some time ago. He's has to be considered one of the most successful coaches in the state's history.
Yeah, and they had a going away celebration for him on Friday night.
How did that work?
It was great. Was it Houston Hall? Kind of hosted a small group of some people that have been around since the beginning. So Mihai's been up here for 29 years.
Oh, I didn't know
29
that.
Years. Yeah. He's been with St. Mark's for 24 years. So so he came over from Romania in the early 90s, and and he's going back to Romania now. And so Houston Hall kind of hosted like 10, 12 people over at his house, and then this was and Mihai knew about that, and then then Houston also organized a drive-by, so where all the former Dallas Masters players that weren't in the top 10, 12 people invited, and a ton of ex St. Mark's players, and also some coaches and referees from the area were invited to come by, and nobody really knew how many cars were going to be there. It's kind of line up at this time and then just kind of come by and say something to Mihai for a minute or two and then move on. But there were probably 75 cars.
No kidding.
Oh yeah,
he deserves it.
Yeah, it was great, and that was a bit of a surprise for him, and I think that was great because there was a ton of kids from the recent kids all the way to the older kids, and I mean he's been somewhere for 24 years, and he built something that was very, very strong there. They've won 5 out of the last 6 state championships, and he's going to go over to Romania. He's going back home, and and he's opening up an athletic club that's going to have a swimming and a swim lesson component, and I'm sure he's going to get involved in the water polo world over there as well. I'm excited for Mihai. I'm very sad to see a friend and a great coach leave Texas, but I'm excited for him. This is his next step. This is something that he's been working towards for the last couple of years. So I mean, I'm just excited to hear good things coming from Romania. So
yeah. And you did say there is some chance he could come back. So, we can always hope, although I just wish him success. Like, I hope that it all works for him. And he is yet another segue. He must be considered at some point a Hall of Famer. And you and I introduced that idea last week, not about him in particular, but the Texas Swimming and Diving Hall of Fame has water polo figures in it. But mainly they're not. They're swimmers who also did water polo, which is fine. But I think you and I and others are trying to spearhead this effort to introduce more straight up water polo figures to the Hall of Fame, and he would be one of them.
Yeah. So if you have any thoughts as far as people that you think might be interested to be nominated, please email pod@txwaterpolo.com.
That's right.
And I mean, we're trying to put together a group of people that we can send to the Texas Swimming and Diving kind of Hall of Fame, from athletes to coaches to referees. Obviously we've gone over the best of Texas, the best of Texas Part 2, and I mean, there's people from 1972 all the way to 2019.
Yeah.
Yes, I would definitely say that Mihai would be on that list. But there are a ton of people that could be nominated, and please send us your ideas, please. I mean, because this is an opportunity to recognize, the people that have done a great job over the years, and that have done a great job here, that played club water polo, that played high school water polo, that went off and played college water polo, that went off and played professional water polo. And we have people from Texas that have done this. Yep. We have coaches that have won multiple state championships. That should be recognized.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are a ton of people. So please, again, email pod@txwaterpolo.com.
I have this thing though, it's the Texas Swimming and Diving Hall of Fame, and then they happen to have people who are also involved in water polo. I think there should be a water polo Hall of Fame. That's just between you and me. That would be great.
Okay.
It's not to say that I don't like that Hall of Fame. I'd like to be associated with it, but I'm the only one. But those are 3 disciplines that are pretty different, especially diving. And again, that's that is the lifelong kind of debate.
It is. I mean, because you don't have a track and field kind of mixed up with football,
right?
But it's one of those. This is an opportunity to have some water polo people recognized, so let's take that opportunity.
When I swam at UC San Diego, and it's hard to believe that I actually swam in college, we would go to meets and we would do well because we had a good diving team. I met one of the divers once. That was it. Like I found it very strange, that relationship. All right. Anyway, Pegasus is also one of the teams that's back to practice, as we mentioned, and I was involved in a town hall yesterday with you, among coaches who are back in the pool, who shared basically what is it that needs to be done in order to get back in the pool according to each locality. So I thought that went pretty well.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, there was everybody has their different positives, their different challenges, and their different guidelines. And, there are some coaches that need to make up their own guidelines. There's other that have very strict guidelines from their facilities. So, I mean, it was interesting to hear. So that is going to be posted at TXWaterpolo.com. Again, we had Southside and Triumph from Houston. We had Zilla and Aquatex from Central Texas. Then we had Pegasus and Sigma from North Texas.
Yeah, that Sigma is so cool. Like that, I'm just so pleased that there's something going on in Fort Worth, and they're underway. That's really good.
Yeah. So please go listen to that or watch that actually.
Yeah.
It was a slightly new format. It's a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. So.
Oh. Yeah, I noticed because I was slightly late. I came straight from another Zoom meeting, and then you got snippy at me about that. But I didn't realize that you enter and then you're granted panelist status. I didn't even know how that worked. So yeah.
Well, I did email you beforehand, but that's okay.
Oh no, I know you did. It's Joe. The last thing that you need to worry about is whether you've communicated something to me enough. I just that meeting that I had beforehand is rock solid weekly, and so it ends at whatever.
No, it's all
6:30.
It's all good. What is it? And it was all in good fun. Thank you for participating last night.
My pleasure. I was very glad to do it. As I've said, as you asked me yesterday, like about what the limitations are. I mean, we have some limitations. We have probably fewer limitations at Aquatex than just about anywhere else in the state. But more than that, I'm just wildly grateful. Like it's as I said yesterday, we lucked into being the first club back in Texas and probably in the States. But I'm just immensely grateful to my club and my coach, or my boss, Mark. So there you go.
And then the Texas Coaches to Coaches are also starting this upcoming Thursday at 12:30 p.m. We're going to have Chris Cullen talking about season practice planning. And then next week we will have MacDonald just talking about just dealing with, school admins and parents and such like that. So, and we're going to continue both the Coach to Coaches and the town hall meetings through the end of July. And all that information's at the TXWaterpolo.com website.
There you have it. All right, time for our first break.
All of TX Water Polo is brought to you advertising free, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're asking for your help. Show your support by going to TXWaterpolo.com/give so we can keep covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, I'm U.S. Olympian Janai Kerr, and when I need to stay up to date with my water polo news in Texas, I listen to the TXWaterpolo Podcast.
James and Joe back with you, segment 2 of the TXWaterpolo Podcast. We're going to run through just a couple things, really. Best of Texas is still, the polling is closed for the week, as we mentioned last week, so we have programs, but we have results. We have results of the Final Four. We wanted to go over those. And Joe is, of course, going to tell me which ones are surprises and which ones are not. For the girls' Final Four, the winner of the matchup between Baytown Sterling and Clear Lake was Baytown Sterling, 55% to 45%.
I don't think that was much of a surprise. I think that obviously in the first round of Best of Texas, Baytown Sterling kind of dominated, and they've won the most state championships on the girls' side. So I don't think that was much of a surprise. But it might have been closer than what I thought. So
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. That I mean, all credit to both teams or both programs rather. But I was a little bit surprised by that. There was a point where it was 50-50. I think our efforts to get people to go out and vote, that mattered. So it turned the tide. The other matchup was Marshall versus Clark. And Clark comes out on top, 53% to 47%.
Was it Clark that came out on top?
Yep.
Okay, well, good. But that's on the girls' side?
That's correct.
Okay, well, good. I mean, I don't think I think Clark played in 9 straight state championship games. I think they won 4 or 5. So, I mean, I think they were slightly better than the Marshall girls. So I'm not too surprised that they slightly beat them. So.
Yeah. Knowing what I know, I was a little bit surprised because Clark did have such success. Not that Marshall didn't, but it was sort of like they were very data-driven results that they had, all these championships, all these participation in championships. But anyway, 53 to 47%, that's a pretty good matchup. So the Battle of San Antonio on the girls' side goes to Clark. On the boys' side, next matchup is Baytown Sterling versus Clear Lakes. Surprise, surprise. Clear Lake comes out on top, 57 to 43%.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that wasn't a little bit closer, the voting wise. Just, if you look back at the Best of Texas Part 1, kind of results. Yeah. I'm not really surprised at the result, though, because Clear Lake did, but they've won the most state championships. They had the most championship game appearances, and they've won championships in the 70s all the way through the 2000s. So. Yeah.
And both of those teams were coached, at least at some point, by Tom Landgraf. We're going to talk about him next. But first, the final of the boys' matchups was St. Mark's versus Clark. And I think you gave me a guess beforehand, but the results were pretty resounding. 86% in favor of St. Mark's over Clark, which earned 14%.
Not surprising. I mean, they've won 5 of the last 6 state championships. They won championships back in the 70s as well. Yeah. So they've had a little bit of a run of excellence here for a while. So, kind of kudos to Mihai and his crew there. So I guess for the boys, it's going to be St. Mark's versus Clear Lake.
Yep, that's right.
All right, get out there and vote, people. Yeah. I think that's going to be a very good matchup. It's going to be, St. Mark's didn't play there for about 10, 15 years in the middle, but obviously whenever they do play, they're very, very good.
I know. Isn't that amazing? They could take a hiatus and then come back and be super successful.
In both Clear Lake and the Clear Lake run in the 90s and the St. Mark's run in the 2010s are very comparable.
Yeah.
And those are the cornerstones of both those programs. So There you go.
All right, so we'll reopen voting for the finals by tomorrow, I suspect, and then if we get enough votes, we'll finish that up on Tuesday. If not, we'll extend it for another week like we've done before, which is cool. But yeah, keep an eye open for that. That'll go out on TXWaterpolo.com quite soon. And speaking of Clear Lake and Sterling, I had a chance to talk with somebody that I've actually never met. I've been here for quite a while, and this is a name who's not only, one of the greats in Texas high school water polo history, but he has all these connections with people from where I came, Long Beach and that Southern California area. But I've never spoken with him, so I had the chance to speak with Tom Landgraf, who was with MacDonald, which was pretty darn interesting.
Oh yeah. So what did you learn about the rise of the Houston teams back in the 90s?
Well, I don't want to spoil it because Mac has some good lines in there about how they created the Jalapeno League and those kinds of things. Sure. But that was basically what I'd learned was the method by which they started to introduce the sport to those who were 10 and under in particular. And that came as a result of, Coach Landgraf became the coach at Sterling in 1980. And then was told straight up when he was hired on the phone, by the way, that he was going to be coaching water polo, about which he knew basically anything. So nothing. So he had to, ramp up quickly. He said he bought some books and so on. And so then achieved success within 3-4 years. And then the Jalapeno League started with 6 teams, I guess, and then ended up with 12. It was really a magnet for growth. So those facts were new to me.
I think the Jalapeno League lasted for quite some time, and I think they had a whole lot more than 12 teams at its peak. Yeah. So, and was it? But yeah, it's an interesting story. I mean, Landgraf, he was not a water polo coach, but he taught himself to be a water polo coach, which is what a lot of coaches here in Texas have to do. And, as long as you're a good coach in one sport, you can be a good coach in another sport. So, and that's what we're looking forward to kind of doing here in fall 2021.
What he mentioned also was that he has some affection for basketball, and this is not an uncommon thing among water polo coaches. John Abdu's nuts about basketball, and he's not the only one. So I asked him specifically because I wanted to know what the relationship was between his success and his background in basketball. And you'll hear it. He tells a story about how his practice was being observed by Rich Corso, who was a U.S. national team coach eventually, and he said, yeah, your practices are kind of backward, except your counterattack. It looks really good. So he invited Landgraf out to California to talk about that. And that was all predicated on what he knew from basketball, the fast break in basketball, like keeping the ball dry and movement and so on. So all new stuff for me. That's really super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge basketball fan as well. I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan. NBA is my favorite kind of professional sport out there. And I mean, I've probably learned more. I mean, obviously, there's some great water polo coaches that I've learned from, but over the years, I mean, I have sat there and asked basketball coaches kind of more questions, and not necessarily about like, the X's and O's or drills and skills of water polo, but it's more about the organization of a program.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, and I don't know if I've said this on this podcast or not, but whenever I was coaching at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, I got to know Bob McKinnon, who was the head basketball coach at the time at the school. Mm-hmm. And he was extremely organized. Like, I mean, granted, I believe that's what all basketball coaches are. We're like, but I just sat there and asked him a ton of questions. I was a 23-year-old kid, whenever I first got that job, and everything is written out to the minute.
Wow.
I'd go watch basketball practice and just see how, and just kind of see how it's organized. And I mean, and he even took me into Manhattan one time because he knew Jeff Van Gundy from working camps, and I got to go to New York's Knicks practice.
No kidding.
So I just got to sit at the bottom couple rows of Madison Square Garden and just sit there and watch for a couple hours. Yeah. And I will never forget the image of Jeff Van Gundy getting into the chest of Patrick Ewing and getting on him with this small guy that's bald, getting into the chest of this huge guy that just kind of stomp him in like in one swing. But Jeff Van Gundy had total control of the practice, and it was to the minute. And the beautiful part about it is, and I use this, whenever I'm talking to my kids a lot, is you would watch like Patrick Ewing or these professionals, they would work on their footwork for like 20 minutes.
Right. Fundamentals.
And this is what we talked about, stuff like the fundamentals. And, so these kids, all they want to do is shoot, right? So in scrimmage. No, you have to work on your fundamentals. So I go back and I say, this is what basketball people do. This is what football people do. This is what linemen do. They work on their footwork to protect the quarterback constantly. It's all about your footwork. It's all about your legs in water polo, your body position in water polo. And so I mean, that's one thing that I gained from basketball for sure. And I mean, I'll watch anything as far as, and I'll read a ton of books as far as the basketball coaches out there.
What I was surprised by when I got back into coaching was how some of the highest level coaches in the country were addicted to reading John Wooden. And Adam Krikorian, who's now the women's national team coach, and he's a certain Hall of Famer. They've had such success. Used to talk about when he was at UCLA, he got the chance to go meet Wooden, every once in a while, which is just amazing. Like the amount that you can glean from that. All right, Joe, I got to get out of here, but. Coming up next is that conversation with Coach Landgraf and MacDonald. You'll hear that with some very not creative editing, that the connection wasn't very good. So I hope you'll bear with it, because it was very interesting conversation. But sometimes the voices fade a little bit. But it was worth it to talk to basically one of the most successful water polo coaches in the state's history. So we'll come back with that conversation in a moment.
Hey, this is Jesse Smith, recent Pan Am gold medalist. I was just checking out Texas Water Polo from the TXWaterpolo Podcast. Also, you can check out the website. You can follow me at GoSmith now. Thanks, guys.
Today, we're getting schooled on how water polo became so big in the Houston area by talking with two of the legendary figures in that area. MacDonald, he's spoken with Joe a couple times. He's has been a long time, basically a pioneer of the sport in the state and a well-known coach at Lamar. But also Tom Landgraf, who's really one of the biggest names in Texas water polo history. He began coaching in 1980 at Baytown Sterling, later went on to Clear Creek. And I think it's fair to say he's had the most successful, at least high school coaching career in Texas water polo history. So today we're talking with these two men about how the sport emerged in Houston since they were key to its growth. So Mac and Tom, thank you for talking with us.
When I got to Texas, the principal says, "Oh, by the way, you're going to coach water polo." I said, "Water polo?" He said, "Yeah, and you're also going to coach, you're going to teach psychology." I said, "I can't even spell it." My first game in water polo was very interesting. Played Steve MacDonald at North Shore. They beat us 21-1. I called my dad that night and I said, "I'm leaving." He said, "What?" "I can't take this. My ego can't take getting beat like this." He said, "Well, I didn't know you were a quitter." So needless to say, I didn't quit, and I got a couple books and paid attention and figured out the game. And within 3 years, I was in the state finals.
Right.
In 4 years, I won my first state championship.
Well,
I had a real good player named David Nestor. And Corso was the assistant coach of water polo at UCLA. He came to recruit him.
Got it.
And
I know that name.
That's how I got hooked up with Rich. And he watched practice one day. He said, "Let's stick around for practice." Okay. So we went to eat. I said, "Well, what do you think?" He said, "Well, Coach, some of the things you're doing are ass backwards. But your counterattack is phenomenal. But I'd like for you to come to the Olympic Training Center this summer and work with my coaches on it." And that didn't sit well with some of the California people.
Right.
But again, I had Corso in my pocket. I was good friends with his friend, Ricardo Azevedo.
Yep.
Monty Niskowski. So I was in pretty good standing there. And again, it was a combination of me getting to work with the national team and going on trips and bringing that back to Texas. It really pushed my team up on top.
So I want to start with a little bit of history, Coach. You are an Indiana native, and I know that you were recruited to come to the state of Texas, sight unseen, on the phone, as you just mentioned. Was Texas on your mind anyway, or was it simply that was an opportunity that presented it to yourself?
No, Texas was on my mind. My aunt lived in Houston, and my uncle lived in San Antonio.
Okay.
So, and I had accepted a scholarship to the University of Houston to swim. But right at the last minute, a very successful high school coach in Indiana got the job at Indiana State, and he offered me a full ride. So I said, Texas is going to have to wait. But again, there was, in my background, no water polo.
Right. I wanted, just as an aside, I wanted to see if you had an opinion about why water polo hasn't really caught on in the state of Indiana. Obviously, there's a NCAA women's team at the university, but there really isn't much of an age group presence, and there's no high school presence. Do you have an opinion about why?
Well, it kind of fits in with what we're talking about. It's been slow moving here in Texas. And it's like I always, when I'd go to a national convention and speak, it's not because you don't have the athletes. We have some great swimmers in Texas. You don't have the coaches. You don't have people who have the background or the ability to coach, and they have egos. So I think it has to do with the supervision of the sport, not that they couldn't get the kids to play it.
Right. That's a situation that is hopeful to me. I've been covering the sport in the entire country for quite some time, and Indiana has always stood out as a place that is basically waiting for water polo to happen. I mean, if it's happening in Tennessee, then, Indiana should be on that map as well. That's just a little editorial there. So I wanted to go over, again, you had a speech at the Texas Hall of Fame, which you are a member of, the Texas Swimming and Diving Hall of Fame. You went a little bit through your chronology. You headed out to Oregon State, and as a one-time resident of very Northern California, I can understand why you wouldn't want to stay. That rain, it just drives you crazy. But then came to Texas to Sterling. And as you mentioned, you were told you were going to teach both water polo and psychology. I wanted to move forward just a second about the psychology part. Did that end up helping you as far as coaching different ages, genders? I mean, was that part of your success, would you say?
I don't know how much I've been asked that question, but it definitely affected the way I coach. It affected the way I coach swimming. It had a big effect on me. It's reward and punishment, B.F. Skinner, and oh yes.
Let me say that the most successful high school swimming coach in the state of Texas was Lanny Landtroop, and Lanny Landtroop taught psychology. And the most successful high school water polo coach in the state of Texas is Tom Landgraf, and Tom Landgraf taught psychology. I taught driver education.
That didn't help you as much, I guess.
I guess not.
No.
Well, there's always somebody comes in the door, a parent, a swimmer. I don't want you trying to read my kid's mind. I don't think it's not like that at all. No experiments, but just some basic fundamentals of psychology are used every day.
Right. I don't want to pass over the success you had at Baytown Sterling, which we're going to cover in a moment. But what was interesting to me is that water polo kind of fell into your lap, according to what your description was. In '84, the Olympic Festival was held in Houston, and your anecdote was that you were asked to do venue preparation for this event. And again, you said, I don't know anything about water polo. But then they said, there's this guy, Dennis Fosdick, who's going to run everything. And the story is really interesting. But I wanted to know, did that begin a long-term relationship with Foz? Because he is yet another legendary figure in the state of Texas.
No, Dennis and I were close until the day he passed. We became good friends, and he helped me immensely, and I could never thank him enough. No, it wasn't just coaching water polo. I did the development camps in the summer. It was a year-round job. And again, that had something to do with the long-term success that I had at Baytown Sterling, because it was a blue-collar type school. And all I did was make it fun. I got the kids to get in the water and have fun. We didn't know what the rules were. So I said, we'll pick them up as we go.
Let me ask you about tactics for a second, because you said that you were asked to come and basically present the way that you counterattack at UCLA of all places, which is quite an honor. My recollection is that Monty Nitzkowski, who was a U.S. national team coach and again a legendary figure, was also influenced a great deal by basketball, and he sort of revolutionized the use of picks in particular. So I'm curious about, what did your basketball experience teach you about the counterattack that was so popular elsewhere?
Well, the basketball, two things. Number one, the shot clock. Shot clock was introduced about the time I started coaching, and it hadn't been in the sport.
Right.
And
Thankfully.
I'm used to a shot clock. Most importantly, on the counterattack, I taught my kids, when the shot clock gets down to 5, I want you leaving. What do you mean leaving? I mean, quit guarding and take off to play offense. So the shot clock had something to do with it. And the transition game on the passing the ball. Water polo, the ball is meant to be passed, not held. You hold the ball, you play, you ought to know what happens. But so moving the ball quickly, good passing. So we worked a lot of passing drills. That's what I brought from basketball.
Really quickly, I think, is your experience with USA Water Polo. You covered a little bit, but are there, that's a connection that I think is sporadic. In other words, you started in '86, but you were involved in USA Water Polo as late as '96. And I'm sure it wasn't full time in every year, but do you have what are your what are your biggest recollections of that relationship with the USA Water Polo staff?
It was marvelous. I was skeptical at first when I went to that first development camp, but from day one, I was treated like an equal. And that had a lot to do with my success and my longevity, because I went every summer. I traveled around the world. I became the head national youth coach. I became assistant junior coach. I got on the national staff. I had a marvelous career, spanning about 12 years. You know, you don't get to go to Brazil every day or Russia every day or Egypt every day. And I got to do all that.
And clearly learned a lot as well, obviously.
Oh, you go to a clinic. I went to ASCA clinics every year. The first time I went to Rich Corso's practice for a week, I learned more than I did in 11 years of ASCA clinics. You know, and it's like I told Eddie Reese, who's a friend of mine, I said, Eddie, it's one thing for you to tell me what you're going to do at a clinic. It's a whole lot different to see you working here on this deck.
Yeah, isn't it? It's being present during practices, which is it might sound tedious, is one of the great learning experiences when you have a skilled coach. So let's get into Houston now. And so the first question is, how did you two meet, and what is the history between the two of you?
Okay, he told you a little bit about this, but he lied to me. He came in and told me that he had been coaching water polo. Now, this pool that he tells this story, I don't remember the score being quite that lopsided, but I very much remember the pool. It was 5 6-foot lanes, shallow on both ends, with a shallow water goal sticking 8 feet off the bottom, looked like a damn movie screen on the end of the pool. So we had a distinct home court advantage. I'm not sure the game really qualified as water polo played in that kind of a condition, but he came, and North Shore and Sterling had been rivals in swimming for as long as they'd had swimming in that area. We became rivals in water polo as well. But you learn something. You get challenged by each other. And I think each of us became better coaches. I knew a lot more about the game at that time than what he did, but he learned really, really fast. And I'll bet you, if you can get him to tell the truth, we would remember more often the times that we lost to the other guy than the times that we beat him, because those were hard to live with.
Okay.
So anyway, he was at Sterling. I was at North Shore. In '84, I left and went to Oklahoma for 8 years.
Right.
And at that time, Tom got involved with the Olympic Festival. At the time, I think it was called National Sports Festival. In '86 or '84, no, it wouldn't have been '84. It was '86, and they played at Spring Branch. And he became involved with the national team at that point and was coaching at Sterling. And when I decided to come back home from Oklahoma, I called him and said, I'm ready to come back home. Do you know of any jobs that are open in the Houston area? And said, hell, you can have mine. I'm leaving. Come on home. So it's not the best career advice to follow a legend into his own pool. It's not the best way to go, but I followed him into Sterling, and he followed Lanny Landtroop into, there was another guy in between there. But it is tough following a legend, and you better be able to come in and convince the kids that you've got something to offer them, or they'll tune you out because they figure they can outweight you. But we had a big rivalry when I was at North Shore and he was at Sterling, and then we had an even bigger rivalry when I was at Sterling and he was at Clear Lake.
Clearly, I think you've done okay for yourself, Mac. So, following a legend has worked out for you. Let's talk about high school as sort of the impetus for growth in the area overall, right? So my understanding is that your high school teams in particular had started competing in the late 70s. Is that right? And then age group followed, from my understanding. But tell me if I'm wrong about that.
That's basically right. Yeah, the sport started in Texas in about 1972. I came out of college in 75 at North Shore, and the teams that were dominating at that time were Clear Creek High School, Lamarck High School under Don Boyd, Clear Lake High School under Lanny Landtroop. Those were the big boys. In North Shore, we were just trying to catch up. We started to catch up around 1980. Tom came to Sterling, and Sterling came on the scene as well. But we didn't really become a strong water polo center until we started something that we named the Jalapeno League, because we didn't think we could get away with calling it the Margarita League. It started off as 6 teams, and I think we ended up at 12.
Yeah.
Before it was a summer league. It was played in the summer, and it gave the kids an option that the USS swimming coaches probably didn't appreciate. But we got them playing the Jalapeno League, and then we realized that we didn't want to go to JOs and just get our heads beat in, but if we put all of our kids together, we could put a more representative team out there. So it was much like Little League Baseball. You played your Little League Baseball season against each other. And like I said, all of the teams had some name that was a derivative from a Mexican restaurant. And we played. And then at the end of the summer, we'd take the kids that wanted to, that could afford to, or were good enough, and put them together with one team and would travel to JOs with them. And taking those kids to JOs was the next really big step.
We wanted it to be a little bit more flexible in the beginning, because I didn't want to scare people off with something highly organized. So that's where we started it, is loose. But it rapidly grew to the point where we had a lawyer come in and write incorporate our laws and bylaws, and we were really flowing then. And instead of taking one team to California to the Junior Olympics, we were taking 6 teams. We were taking 14s, 16s, 18s, and girls and boys. So what started out to be kind of grassroots grew into something highly developed.
We are talking in terms of best of Texas programs. We have a poll out there right now in which a couple of your teams are in there. So there you go. But did you have any sense at the time that it was sort of a competition between Houston and San Antonio, or were you just wanted to grow in your area? It didn't have anything to do with anybody else?
No, we wanted to kick San Antonio's butt. They'd been kicking ours. We got tired of it, and we thought we kind of happened upon the idea that playing year-round, or at least playing in the summer when everybody else was stopping to go back to their swimming programs, we kind of always felt like if you were playing water polo and if you were playing the game hard, you were getting benefit for your swimming. And your swimming team would benefit when we started back into the high school swimming team. But in the meantime, our kids did not realize that they'd been in the water all year long. They thought they were having fun most of the time, and then they'd buckle down to the swimming team. But the water polo end of it, San Antonio was dominant. They were winning, and neither one of us liked to lose. So, what is it? Everybody has the will to win, but it's the guy that just hates losing that's going to eventually win out.
I wonder if, and we've spoken to George Block a couple times now. Joe had a long interview with him about San Antonio. I'm wondering, it seems awfully clear that you're quite proud of how you accomplished what you did in relation to San Antonio, but were you also at the same time, sort of unpleasantly surprised at the demise of the sport in San Antonio?
Yeah, that was disappointing. It's you got to have a rival. This thing's not as much fun unless you have a rival. And we had each other as rivals, but it was a lot of fun when it was San Antonio versus Houston. And when they kind of de-emphasized the sport for reasons that I guess George has explained, they were very much focused on the swimming end of things. And they felt like they needed to focus on swimming. They felt like we were overemphasizing water polo. I'm not sure if that's fair or not. That was the way it got back to us. But when they de-emphasized their program, it left us just kind of looking at each other here in Houston. Dallas was only St. Mark's at that time. There wasn't anybody else playing in Dallas. So it kind of left us just here in the city of Houston ourselves. And that probably led to our coming down as well at the end of the thing when we had the 2008-2009 dual seasons between Texas high school water polo and TXWaterpolo water polo. So we regretted San Antonio not staying as involved as what they had.
Let me go over a couple of statistics here, a couple of accomplishments. So, Coach Tom, Coach of the Year 20, and just on the girls' side, Coach of the Year 2011, 09, 08, tied with Coach Slay, 96 and 94, and state champions in 09, 04, 96, and 95. And just wait for this. Boys, Coach of the Year, 85, 86, 1990, 91, 94, 95, 98, 2000, 2008, and 2009. State champs, 86, all 4 years, or no, excuse me, 5 between 1991 1991 and 1990, and then 1994 through 1998, state champions, 2002, 2008, 2009. So,
and that was in 2 different schools.
Right, exactly. So Sterling at between 1990 or 86 and 91, and then Clear Lake beyond that. I mention all of that because, as you know, we're doing this Best of Texas program, and here are the finals. We're in the Final Four situation. On the girls, it's I gotta get that in front of me. It's Baytown Sterling versus Clear Lake. On the boys, it's Baytown Sterling versus Clear Lake. That must be a matter of pride, I would suspect, for you and for the entire Houston region.
Yeah, but I hadn't showed him where to vote yet.
Oh yeah, you do need to spread the word about that. That poll closes not until next Tuesday, so you can alter the outcome of those competitions.
Yeah, we are extremely proud of the rivalry and the history between Baytown Sterling and Clear Lake. It probably epitomizes the relationship between Tom and I more than anything, especially as I said earlier when I asked him, where's a job open? And he said, come take mine. And that takes a big man to open it up like that. And I very much appreciate that opportunity. But our kids are rivals, and some of them are friends. But Tom and I are friends that have also been rivals. And that's been questioned before. I had a USS swimming coach that was upset with me about the allocation of pool time, because they were all using the pool where I was. And he was a little bit upset that I'd given pool time to Tom. And he said, why did you do that? I go, because he's my friend. And he goes, I've seen you guys on the deck of a water polo game, and you don't look like friends. I said, listen, son of a bitch, I got precious few number of friends in this world. I'll be damned if I'm going to let you start picking them out for me. So it's a healthy rivalry.
Spirited and healthy at the same time, yeah. So of all of those teams, and I've interviewed Zane Bellel, and the voting on the Best of Texas teams was both of the 2007 Sterling teams, and that might be a little bit of a tough subject for you, Coach Tom, because you were on the other end of those 2 victories by Sterling. But what is it that you remember about that 2007 year, which apparently produced some of the best water polo in the history of the state?
I never talked about winning a state championship. Never mentioned it to my team. I said, we got a game today. We're going to play water polo. Whoever plays best is going to win. You ready? They said, yeah, let's go. So I didn't pick out the team. I didn't pick out the coach. I didn't pick out the star player. Every once in a while, we did a little something. The state championship in 2004 is the only real strategy I remember. And we were playing Cypress Creek for the title. And they had several good players, but they had one weak girl. We never guarded her. And they would throw the ball to her. She would shoot the ball right at our goalie. Our goalie would catch it. We'd already counterattack and score at the other end. The girl who scored 4 goals in that game didn't usually ever score, but we took advantage of that girl. I talked to the coach after the game, and I've talked to him subsequently years later. He says, man, I should have seen you doing what you were doing. Like, I can't imagine you got by with that. I said, well, you beat us. They had beaten us that year. They didn't beat us in that game.
Let me tell you a little bit about that 2007.
Yeah, please.
The 2007 series of games. I had just left Sterling, and I left Sterling because I was looking for a gracious way out. It had become a lot of pressure because at Sterling, if you didn't win the state championship, it was considered a failure of a year. And I'd been through that meat grinder for 14 years. And I was looking to make life a little bit easier on myself. But mostly, I had an assistant coach there that had played for me at Sterling. And I very much believed in the idea of welcome back Cotter. I wanted to leave the Sterling program in the hands of a former Sterling player. And that former Sterling player, Scott Slay, started his career playing water polo with Tom when he was an age group kid there in Baytown, and he was playing Baker Road Aquatic Team. So the coach of that 2007 team, that was a tremendous team, very, very talented. The boys were led by Zane Bilal and Matt Chapa and Stevie. What was Stevie's last name? Stevie Ray. Those were kids that we all felt a connection to because we started them when they were young. Tom started Scott when he was young. I started Zane and Stevie and Matt when they were young. So even though Scott had the team and did a tremendous job with them and is still a tremendous coach, there was a little bit of a pride in the fact that that was our former school and those were our former players. And Scott Slay is the one of the very best coaches in the state of Texas right now. And even though we hate losing to him, there's a little bit of pride when you see one of your own come through like that.
Yeah, if we're talking about some of the most famous coaches in the state, meaning that you two are on that list, then Scott Slay has to be considered at least a candidate to maybe even take your spot. Yeah. I just wanted to thank you both very much for letting us in a little bit on how you helped grow the sport in Houston. So thank you both.
You're very welcome.
All right, we're all done. That was my conversation with Coach Landgraf and MacDonald. Just a couple other things to wrap up for the day. What's coming up next week?
We have the Texas, we are going to continue the Southwest Zone Town Hall meetings at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays, and the Texas Coaches to Coaches at 12:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Those are also all going to be posted at TXWaterpolo.com. So don't forget, and also please email pod@txwaterpolo.com anybody that you feel might and should be nominated for the Texas Swimming and Diving Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Joe.
You take care, James.
I will take care, and thanks to everyone for thanks to Coach Landgraf and Mac for taking the time to talk with us, of course. Thank you for listening and telling a friend about the podcast. You can find us on social media and leave comments, give it to the cause, and stay up to date with what's going on in the game at txwaterpolo.com. Until next week, so long from Austin.
Yeah, so long.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.